Hello Citadel lovers all over the world. Things got even more complicated in this episode 5 with the title, Time Renders Us Enemies. Penultimate episode of the season. That left more questions than answers with the revelations. So I'm going to separate by topics, to make it easier to understand. I feel a certain doubt if everything will be explained in the last episode. Because it has a lot to explain. Perhaps these first season plotlines will be explained in a second season. I'm not going to narrate the episode, but rather put my doubts and theories about the episode and the entire season so far. I believe there are several traitors to the Citadel. And this can be separated into two groups of characters. These theories may give rise to a single person as a traitor or a group of traitors. And if it's just a traitor to Citadel, the main ones are Grace or Mason. Let's first go over a group of traitors, which will also indicate why Grace can be a traitor alone to the Citadel or betraying with other agents. One of the groups of traitors would be Grace, Nadia and Celeste. The reason why I think so: Nadia and Celeste came from Citadel's Bravo team until they were Tier 1. According to what Nadia tells Mason when she introduces herself to Mason, Nadia says that Grace pleaded with Nadia to go to Tier 1 and help Mason on the mission. During the season, Nadia was always in contact with Grace before any other character. It was Grace who approved Celeste's move from Bravo team to Citadel's Tier 1. It is revealed when Nadia talks to Grace one morning, 10 years ago, when Nadia and Mason were in Paris without Mason knowing. It is shown that Mason is even surprised to learn that Nadia had spoken to Grace. Nadia receives the information about Celeste being backstopped by a message with ID 01 on her phone. What can be the ID 01 related to Grace, as Grace is the superior in command of everyone, even Bernard? Nadia is called by Grace to return to the Citadel after being off duty for a year while pregnant. It was Grace who called Nadia to go to the mission on the train in Italy where the season begins. Could it be that Grace wanted Nadia to die on the train so no one would know that Grace was the traitor with Nadia's death? Nadia has her past revealed in this episode 5. Nadia is the daughter of a Citadel agent mother and a terrorist father. This connection has not yet been explained, which could further lead to Nadia being a Citadel traitor. Her mother is mentioned 3 times in the series. At the beginning, when Nadia introduces herself to Mason, when Nadia breaks up with Mason, and when Nadia talks to baby Asha. Nadia says that the baby will be fine with Nana. Nana is usually used as a diminutive for grandmother and Nono for grandfather. Celeste. She came from the Citadel's Bravo team, saving Nadia's life. Celeste may have been infiltrated early on by the Manticore to gain Nadia's trust by saving her. Or it could be a story created by Nadia and Grace to put Celeste in Tier 1. That Nadia's rescue was not shown or explained, it is only located. Celeste goes on a super risky mission just 36 hours after becoming Tier 1 to get all the Oz key secrets, and everything goes wrong. Supposedly the Oz key ends up in Nadia's hands, which she claims to have destroyed. Grace. She appears during the beginning of the season. During the elimination of the agents and the fall of the Citadel, Grace does not appear to be killed, and no image of her has been eliminated in the Citadel's monitors and records. Grace simply disappears. When Mason wants to backstop Celeste, Grace is against it. And it is possibly Grace who notifies Nadia that the backstop was made in Celeste by message, ID 01. Grace, as superior at Citadel, has access to secrets and all Citadel data. She knows the bad things Citadel did, like the attack in Belgrade that killed Dahlia's family. She knows what happened to Nadia's mother. Now the most intriguing. Mason Kane. Mason is shown in the past as an asshole, always showing himself as the most loyal agent to Citadel. But he has his masks to be discovered. Mason is shown to be a big liar, telling the truth as a lie and influencing those around him. In the first episode on the train in Italy 8 years ago, Mason has a wedding ring and would have ended his relationship with Nadia 1 year ago. Nadia asks about the ring on his finger. Mason responds that it's part of his disguise. But if we go a few episodes ahead, we have 2 scenes and Mason's lines that prove that Mason was already married to Celeste. Mason wakes up in the hospital with no memory with a passport with the name Kyle Conroy and the wedding ring on it. There we have Mason. A scene showing Mason making Celeste's new identity after backstopping her. Mason then tells Carter, "After today I would live in this house." House, which is where Mason is living at the beginning of the season with Celeste, who is already Abby. Another fact is what Carter says to Mason in this scene. "You gave her, Celeste, 2 children." Carter also asks Mason what Mason will do if Citadel's superiors find out that Mason backstops Celeste without authorization. Mason replies that he will have to live in this house he is creating in Oregon, which is where he is living at the beginning of the season with Celeste. And a daughter who may not be Mason and Celeste, but rather a child created to be part of his Mason disguise. Remember that it was revealed that Abby was in a car accident and met Mason at a memory recovery group at the hospital, which may have been why Abby only had 1 daughter and no brother, and not the 2 children Mason would have developed as Celeste's new life. With the accident, Abby's children and brother would have died. That is, Mason started the season already married to Abby for a year. Being Mason Kane and using the identity of Kyle Conroy and working with Citadel. The season starts 8 years ago. Nadia breaks up with Mason 9 years ago after Celeste's backstop. Mason and Nadia's relationship starts 10 years ago in Paris and lasted a year. Mason really liked Celeste as Nadia suggested. So Mason was living in Oregon with Celeste already as Abby. That's why Mason had his wedding ring and a passport with the name Kyle Conroy on it. When he woke up after the train accident 8 years ago, that would be a year after he ended the relationship with Nadia and made the backstop in Celeste. Which leads to Mason protecting himself and not Nadia when he was backstopping Celeste. Because Celeste must have found out that Mason was the traitor by being with Anders. And why that? Anders says in the second episode that everything has always been about Mason. When Mason meets Nadia, it is revealed that Mason grew up without a mother. When Mason breaks up with Nadia, the relationship, he says he was 5 years old and his father died and his mother left. Dahlia reveals in episode 5 that Mason is the only one who can release the nukes as they are encoded to him during a mission years ago. Dahlia doesn't want Mason dead, which leads to a theory about Dahlia and Mason. Dahlia can be your mother or grandmother. Dahlia rebelled against Citadel after the massacre of UN families in Belgrade, where her son or husband Thomas was killed. It is not explained who Thomas is. Your husband or Dahlia's child. We see this at the beginning of the season where Dahlia is watching an old report about a bomb that exploded in Belgrade in the condominiums of the families of representatives of the UN. We know that the Citadel dropped the bomb because Dahlia says so to Bernard. And when Dahlia is watching the report, the camera shows a picture with Dahlia and a man who must be Thomas and a child. Who could be Mason at 5 years old? If Dahlia is Thomas Mason's wife, it could be her son. If Thomas is Dahlia's son, Mason is Dahlia's grandson. And Thomas was Bernard's friend. Which is why Citadel recruited Mason. Mason's grandmother is said to have lived in Oregon, where Mason put Celeste after the backstop and moved in with her 8 years ago after breaking up with Nadia. And was already married to Celeste and lied to Nadia after seeing her 8 years ago on the train in Italy. Mason wakes up with no memory already with Kyle Conroy's passport and wedding ring. Dahlia is an ambassador for England and lives in the United States. She used to work at the UN with Bernard. Mason always appears in the past as an evil person. Mason had a connection to Balduino Basto, a Manticore agent. And he was always lying to Nadia to get what he wanted. He erased Celeste's memory and destroyed her files. Which leaves Mason as a major possible traitor. Could this be the reason Mason was left alive with no memory after the fall of Citadel? Is this the reason for keeping Mason without memory for the storyline, because Mason was the Citadel's traitor? About the scenes of the next episode. We have Carter in the present holding a vials. Will it be the memory of Mason or Celeste? Mason would remember that he himself was the traitor. That's why it shows an image of Mason punching a mirror with his own image. Another thing that goes unexplained. Anders Silge starts the season without being arrested. Would he have made another Oz key, since there is no Citadel for 8 years? And the vials inside the X case and its resources, why aren't they exploited? This was the penultimate episode of this season. So we will have big reveals in the next episode of Citadel. See you next time. Thank you for watching our videos, subscribe to the channel, leave your like and your comments. Cheers.